Okay, I heard the beat. Good. Okay, we're in Deuteronomy chapter 3 this week. You should have handouts, which is the NIV. Now, this is one of those passages, kind of like part of last week, that most of the time doesn't get much preaching time, because, as we would say in seminary, that passage don't preach. And the reason is, it's history, it's basically a travel log, it's highly repetitive, and to us today it doesn't seem to carry a strong message. But to the Israelites in that day, it was very important. Okay? And if you understand it historically in its perspective, it's very important. And we'll take it paragraph by paragraph. Next we turned and went up along the road towards Bashan, and Og, king of Bashan, with his whole army, marched out to meet us in battle at Edrei. Yahweh said to me, "Do not be afraid of them, for I have handed him over to you, with his whole army and his land. Do to him what you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who reigned in Heshbon." Okay. This is, I kind of drew a map up here on the board. Remember, they started out down here by Moab, and they're traveling north along the King's Highway. Okay, they defeated Sihon, who had been down here in the south, and they're moving up towards this area where they're going to defeat Og, king of Bashan. And what I kind of did is I put in where some of the different tribes are and geographical markers, because you'll hear about the Zered Brook, okay, you'll hear about the Arnon River, and I know in our reading this morning we mentioned the Arnon Gorge, okay, which is like a valley for the river. And those are landmarks that they use. And these, just like the states in America, have you ever noticed when you look at the shapes of the states that they tend to follow the course of a river? Okay, because that's a natural border. Okay, this side is ours, that side is yours. It makes it very easy. Unlike the border with Canada, which is a big chalk line that someone renews every so often. And you can see where the different tribes moved into these areas. Gilead is up here in the north by what is in this passage called the Lake of Kinneret, which is the old name for the Lake of Galilee, or the Sea of Galilee. Okay, Manasseh moves up here by the Sea of Galilee, where Gilead is. The tribe of Gad moves in the middle here next to the Jordan River, and Reuben's down here in the south on the eastern side. Now, if you're like me, I get things backwards. I keep thinking that this is the east side of the Jordan. It's not. That's the east side. This is the west side. Okay, these 2.5 tribes moved on to the east side when they took over this territory. And sometimes it's hard from the text reading it to get a picture of who's where and doing what. Okay, and that's why we have maps. So they're going to move in, and God assures Moses, says, "I'm going to give you Og." Now, he's one of the last of the Rephaites, and we talked about that. I don't believe they're the true Rephaites from like before the flood, but they are giants, okay? And remember how the people reacted to the giants 40 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. They saw the giants and they said, "No way we're going in there." Okay? Well, Og is one of the last of the Rephaites in the sense that he reminds people of the former guys before the flood, because he is big. Next paragraph, verse 3. "So Yahweh our God also gave into our hands Og, king of Bashan, and all his army. We struck them down, leaving no survivors. At that time we took all his cities. There was not one of the 60 cities that we did not take from them. The whole region of Argob, Og's kingdom in Bashan. All these cities were fortified with high walls and with gates and bars. And there were also a great many unwalled villages. We completely destroyed them, as we had done with Sihon, king of Heshbon, destroying every city, men, women, and children. But all the livestock and the plunder from their cities we carried off for ourselves." And last week we mentioned that this is under the harem principle. These cities were devoted to God, and the harem can be applied at different levels. It can be either total destruction of everybody and everything, or it can be limited. In this case, it's limited to simply the people, because the people were corrupt, the animals weren't. Okay? In this case, they take away plunder. Now, notice what the difference is between a city and a village. Do you see a definitional difference?
The cities were walled and fortified, and the villages weren't.
Exactly. The cities were important enough that they built protective walls around them. a lot of times in our mind we think, well, these cities weren't really cities, in the sense they had any defenses. They were just villages and we could just walk into them. And that's not true. But there were 60 fortified cities. That's, by my estimation, a lot of cities to go in and conquer. Okay, and they took every one of them. And when it says they destroyed the cities, I don't believe it means they tore down all the walls and buildings, but they conquered them. They took possession of them. In verse 8, so at that time we took from these two kings of the Amorites the territory east of Jordan, from the Arnon Gorge as far as Mount Hermon. Hermon is called Sirion by the Sidonians, the Amorites call it Senir. We took all of the towns on the plateau, and all Gilead, and all Bashan, as far as Salecah and Edrei, towns of Og's kingdom in Bashan. Okay, so it mentions they went all the way north and they took all of Gilead. So they just conquered this whole territory here. And he sums it up very quickly. You don't get a lot of description of individual battles. It's just, God did this, we took it over, and that's it. Not a lot of commentary. In verse 11, only Og, king of Bashan, was left of the remnant of the Rephaites. His bed was made of iron and was more than 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. It is still in Rabbah of the Ammonites. Okay. Now notice that this little excerpt here, verse 11, is in parentheses. Why do you think that might be?
This little what?
Verse 11 is in parentheses.
Because it wasn't actually in Scripture?
Because it was a later addition. Because here, Torah is written by Moses, but later on someone added in addition that bed is still a historical object found in Rabbah of the Ammonites. Or you can still go see the bed when they put that excerpt in there. Okay? So it's in a later additional note. Verse 12. Of the land we took over at that time, I gave the Reubenites and the Gadites the territory north of Aroer by the Arnon Gorge, including half of the hill country of Gilead, together with its towns, including half of the hill country of Gilead, together with its towns. The rest of Gilead, and also all of Bashan, the kingdom of Og, I gave to the half-tribe of Manasseh. Now, if you remember, half the tribe of Manasseh is on the east. That's why it says East Manasseh. Over here, you would have West Manasseh. Okay, Manasseh got a massive amount of grazing territory because they had lots of cattle. Okay, they were the grazers and herders and shepherds. So they got lots of land. They seemed, and again, remember, the land was apportioned according to how many people you had. That determined how many cities you had. If you're dealing with cow land, think about this. When you go through middle Florida, okay, and you have all the cow territory, you see lots of cities there? No, because it's pasture land. You don't crowd your animals with cities. You want your animals spread out. You only want so many per acre so that they have enough grazing. Otherwise, they tend to be malnourished. So Manasseh, being shepherd people, have lots of territory, but not an extra large number of cities. Verse 14, Jair, a descendant of Manasseh, took the whole region of Argob as far as the border of the Geshurites and the Maacathites. It was named after him, so that to this day Bashan is called Havoth Jair, and Havoth just means the territory of Jair. You notice as you read through Scripture that lands get named after the people that first settled it. Is that still common today?
Yeah.
Dade County, named after a historical figure. It's funny, I grew up in Dade County in my early years, and in none of my schooling did they ever mention how Dade got its name. There was, if I remember correctly, I haven't done any research on it, but I kind of got it casually, there was a General Dade who came in and started to develop South Florida. And so the county got named after him. Okay, and if we don't pay attention to history, we just kind of assume names are there, and we don't know how they got there. We just know this is called this is called that, and we don't look back and really see what is involved in it. My mother, for a while, got very involved in Florida history. found it fascinating. Okay, and all the names have historical significance. Does that sound biblical? Think about it. We just had a territory named Havaoth Jair, the territory of Jair. Okay, when you have the inheritance in Israel, it's connected to names. Okay, because the land was allotted to a particular family.
And it always went back every 50 years, so it makes sense to name it after the tribe that, or people that it goes to.
Right. So if you have the territory of Jair, if his descendants sell it at the Jubilee, it goes back to the family of Jair, okay, who actually isn't Jair, it's Yair, because there's no J's in Hebrew. Okay. But this makes sense. And this is what we just looked at last night when we studied through the book of Ruth. Okay, Boaz marries Ruth to raise up children, not for himself, but for Mahlon, her first husband, who died. Okay, so he's reclaiming the territory that was hers, but he's reclaiming it in her dead husband's name so that it won't pass out of her family. And in doing that, he acts as the kinsman redeemer, or the Goel. It's funny there because the story goes on. Boaz is not the closest relative. He offers the land to the closest relative, and the guy says, "Oh yeah, I'll do that." And he says, "By the way, you get Ruth with it." And the guy goes, "No, that'll confuse my inheritance with hers. I don't want to do that. Okay, you can have her. You can have her and the land." And he backs away from it, and Boaz takes her. And it seems like maybe Boaz is taking something that is going to lower him in honor and respect and property, in a sense, at that time. But what it does is it puts him into the line of Messiah. So what seems like a temporary setback may be an eternal blessing. Okay. Anyway, verse 15. And I gave Gilead to make her, but to the Reubenites and the Gadites I gave the territory extending from Gilead down to the Arnon Gorge, the middle of the gorge being the border, and out of the Jabbok River, which is the border of the Ammonites. Okay, and again we see the river being very important. You know, it says your territory extends to the middle of the river. Okay, not even to the other side, but just to the middle of the river. The other guys own the other half of the river. It'll be interesting. I wonder what happens when you build a dock. You know, if your dock goes past the middle, does the guy on the other side come over and chop it down? Verse 17. Its western border was the Jordan in the Arabah, from the Kinneret, which is the Galilee, to the Sea of Arabah, the Salt Sea, below the slopes of Pisgah. Okay. Why is the Dead Sea called the Sea of Arabah? Because this is the Arabah here. This territory basically means south and desert. And the sea is there by that desert, so it's the Sea of the Arabah, the Sea of the desert. Verse 21, at that time I commanded Joshua, you have seen with your own eyes all that Yahweh your God has done to these two kings. Yahweh will do the same to all the kingdoms over there where you are going. Do not be afraid of them. Yahweh your God himself will fight for you. Now there's something important here. What's the impression you get of Joshua? Does he seem like a naturally outgoing leadership type?
Yeah.
Or is he always kind of in the background as like Moses' helper?
Well, he was Moses' helper.
Yeah, he seems to be very much in the background. You don't hear much from him. The only thing that he's done to really make himself outstanding is when he goes out, he's one of the 12 spies, and he and Caleb both come back and say, yeah, let's go do it. You know, God's with us, God can take him. Other than that, he's just there. He doesn't seem like a real important character. And you'll see Moses constantly encouraging him to be, faithful and courageous and to go out and do it. And he holds him to account with this. He says, you've seen with your own eyes all that Yahweh your God has done. It's no longer an issue of what did your parents tell you about. In other words, the first generation saw what God did in Egypt. They're dead now. Okay? And he's saying to Joshua and to the people, you've seen with your own eyes that God can defeat these people. They're giants. God can defeat them. You have 2 great victories behind you now, including the fight with Moab, which they also won. He says, okay, you've seen it with your own eyes. Don't be afraid. Go in and take the land, because God will himself fight for you over there the same as he did here. In other words, we messed up 40 years ago and chickened out. Okay, don't do it again. Why? Because you don't want to spend another 40 years in the desert. Okay, so he's really holding them to account there. Verse 23, at that time I pleaded with Yahweh, O sovereign Yahweh, you have begun to show to your servant your greatness and your strong hand. For what God is there in heaven or on earth who can do the deeds and mighty works you do? Let me go over and see the good land beyond the Jordan, that fine hill country and Lebanon. But because of you, Yahweh was angry with me and would not listen to me. Now, that's one of 3 times in the first 4 chapters that Moses is going to say, it's because of you that I can't go over. Okay, you think Moses is kind of feeling a little put upon? Think about this. Moses spends 40 years in the palace of the Pharaoh. He has the best of everything. Then he goes back and he lives 40 years in the desert with his family, herding sheep, and he has a quiet, peaceful life. Okay, he's given up on that whole thing of dreams of glory. And then after 40 years, God comes to him and says, I want you to go back and deliver your people. And Moses says, forget it. Pick somebody else. I'm over it. Okay, and God says, no, I want you. And God insists upon it. No matter what excuse Moses makes, God says, you're going to go and you're going to be my leader. Moses finally concedes to go. Now, has he ever seen the land of Israel? No. And this is mind-boggling to me when I finally realized it. He's never seen this place. He's going totally on faith. He's going to spend the next 40 years going to a place he's never seen because God told him it's a land flowing with milk and honey. He gets up to the border and he's going to die. And he's not even going to see it. Can you feel the stress that Moses would be in? You know, I spent my whole career here leading these people, putting up with all this nonsense, all this grumbling, them wanting to kill me every time things didn't go the way they wanted, and now I don't even get to see it. And so he pleads with God repeatedly to let him go in. And God says no, and God's finally going to give in enough to say, okay, you can see it. In other words, you don't have to die in faith not having seen it, I'll let you see it. Because Moses wouldn't let it go. Verse 26, but because of you, Yahweh was angry with me and would not listen to me. That is enough, Yahweh said. Do not speak to me any more about this matter. Go up to the top of Pisgah and look west and north and south and east. Look at the land with your own eyes, since you are not going to cross this Jordan. But commission Joshua and encourage him and strengthen him, for he will lead this people across and will cause them to inherit the land that you will see. So he stayed in the valley near Beth Peor. Now again, this is just one of many times it's going to say, encourage and strengthen Joshua. And I think it's important to remember that people attach God's power and authority to a person. Do people control God's power and authority?
No.
No. God controls God's power and authority. He may use a person, but the power is not attached to that person.
No.
And the people all have enough experience of Moses to say, Moses is the guy with all the power. And they're looking at Moses as the focal point. Well, the focal point is going to change from Moses to Joshua, okay, in their eyes. But the focal point is really Yahweh. He's the one who wins the battles and victories. The power belongs to him. He just used Moses. And if you think about it, do we not do the same thing today?
Yeah. The Pharisees did it to some of the apostles. They say, you are the disciples of him, referring to Jesus, but we are the disciples of Moses.
Right.
So they're doing it right there.
And in 1 Corinthians 3, you have the same thing.
Yeah.
People will saying, I'm a follower of, and they'll name off a different apostle.
Yeah.
And Paul says, that's not the issue.
No.
Don't be followers of anybody. Okay, and in fact, he says, I'm glad I didn't baptize any of you, because then you'd be looking at me like I was God. Okay, I'm not the focal point.
No.
You know, you look to Messiah, not to people. The Bible college I went to was built largely by a man named Ray Stanford. Okay, in my senior year, he was caught in adultery and removed from his position. The Bible college doubled in numbers every year up until that point. Guess what happened after he fell? It went down. It halved in size every 2 years after that, because people were focused on the man, not the message. Okay, he was replaced actually by people who were better teachers than he was, but everybody was so focused on him that the college died after he left, and it no longer exists today. They struggled on for a number of years trying to keep it going, but without him as the focal point, it died. And it's because people had their eyes on a man. Now it's funny, the college didn't have any kind of notoriety, except as they sent out people into the country around the world as missionaries. Okay, but the world news had never picked up on the Bible college, even though it was supposed to be the largest one in the world at that time, until Ray fell into adultery. The next day after that was heard, people who had students there in England said, "Hey, I read in the paper that the president of your Bible college was caught in adultery." That was how they made world news. The world news never paid any attention to them while they were doing good works and teaching people. They only cared that a Christian leader had fallen,
That's right.
because that was a disgrace to the church.
It's the same way with Israel. You don't hear about what's going on over in the Middle East until Israel fights back. Then that's all you see on the news. Israel did this, Israel did that. It's all their fault.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, other than that, you don't hear about Israel.
Well, and that's something funny that came up a couple of years ago. There has to be an extreme reason to call an emergency council of the United Nations. They called an emergency council of the United Nations on, I think, only 2 occasions at that time. And they called the second one because Israel is building an apartment complex. Building an apartment complex calls for an emergency council of the world, the national or the United Nations.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Only because it's anti-Israel would it make such a splash.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll pick up chapter 4 next time, and chapter 4 will preach a little better than chapter 3.